old pal the Moo Cow here with a brand new image that they generated for me online. It's a cow, naturally, so that works. And I am here to do a quick review for the movie Warfare, which came out in 2025, and I saw last week. And this was a really, really good film. And unlike a lot of typical Hollywood movies that sort of use this sort of theme or this type of film where it's kind of glamorized, and then there was kind of a backlash against that where they sort of made war movies a lot more sort of violent and filthy and sort of showing how horrible warfare certainly can be. This is a little bit more of a realistic point of view in that in real warfare there's times when there's just like nothing going on and it's rather boring and you're just kind of sitting and hurrying up to wait. And soldiers have to deal with that because warfare can actually break out at any moment and you just don't know when. But when it does, then it just goes off the rail and it's just extremely realistic and it's somewhat graphic. I wouldn't say that it's the most graphic film I've ever seen because that's not what the focus is. The focus is more on what the infantrymen, or actually the Marines in this case, go through. So when they are surrounded in their mission, which is to support some Navy troops and to sort of watch the general area to make sure that there's no bad guys there, well, they get found out pretty quickly. And when they do, the whole bunch of them come and they start first it's an IUD, which blows up the hell out of one of their Bradley fighting vehicles and injures a bunch of folks. And the concussions behind the explosions behind the bullets hitting the wall are really, really strong. And you get to see things like the effects of those concussions on soldiers. It's not like in the movies, the typical Hollywood movies, where they just kind of shake it off and it's like never even happened. Oh no, these effects affect you throughout the rest of the film, probably throughout the rest of your life, which is exactly what happens. These guys are all dazed and screwed up because of these concussive explosions. They bounce off of your head and your brain is getting bruised literally while it's inside the skull because of that. And because of that, it affects the way you think, it affects the way you make decisions, it affects the way that you see the world, it affects your reactions, and it affects what you end up doing in those critical moments when you're under attack. And so that's kind of really the focus of this film. The story is kind of, I want to say incidental, but it kind of takes a back seat to presenting warfare as realistically as possible. The platoon that's there sort of does whatever that's supposed to do, but the film doesn't take sides. It doesn't say that these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. This is sitting sort of objectively above it at the 300-foot level looking down, because the enemy soldiers are kind of just doing their thing. They've all got their own missions going on and they have their own issues and their own things going on. So when you finally go through, and really this is just basically the story of what happens on one particular day during a particular mission. At the end of the mission, and I'm not going to spoil it and say exactly what happens, but the group of American Marines, gets to a point, and then the defending folks, the jihadists, also get to a point. You can't really say either one has won or lost, and you get the feeling that's probably the majority of the sort of fire missions that happen in warfare. Doesn't really necessarily favor one side or the other. There are people who get wounded, there are people who get killed, there are people who get very grievously wounded, but you don't necessarily win or lose. And that's just it. And warfare is just kind of a never-ending sort of list of those that sort of go one after the other, after the other, after the other. And you can understand how it's not so much what happens in one battle, unless you're very unlucky, but it's more along the lines of what happens over time. Because over time, the more times you're getting concussed and the more times you're getting put under that kind of trauma and that kind of stress, that it starts to physically, mentally, and spiritually just grind you down, which is why in the old days, and I assume today, you would be rotated out as soon as you could, because humans are, we're not machines. We need to have a break from that sort of thing. So I thought that this film was really very well done in that regard. So the directors are Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, and they are putting out this film for A24, which has really shown a track record of excellent films. I've been very, very impressed with some of the films that they've been doing, and I'm glad that they kind of stayed away from the sort of typical Hollywood glamorization of warfare and went more realistic. There's no stars, quote unquote, that you would normally find in a Hollywood film, but there's a bunch of folks that are sort of character actors that you've seen most likely in other films. So Will Poulter is in there, and Michael Gandolfini is in there, Joe McCauley, Evan Holtzman, Cosmo Jarvis, Aaron McKenzie, Alex Brockdorf, Finn Bennett. You've seen a lot of these folks before. Adrian Bradley. And they apparently made this film based on the information and the ideas and the opinions of veteran folks who were over in Iraq who had to experience this sort of thing. And they acted as technical advisors and story advisors and just people who would get continuity correct and uniforms correct, how they moved, how the soldiers discharged their weapons, all that sort of stuff. And that adds a whole lot of reality to the film. So it's not like a bunch of cowboys running around out there. And to me, that sort of grounds the film in a kind of reality that makes it even more, because it's so more realistic, that it ratchets up the tension, because you understand anytime anything can happen to pretty much anyone. It really comes down to luck and making the right decisions. And even if you make the right decisions, there's no guarantee that you're going to come out of those experiences unscathed. And it's a very small chance, as a matter of fact. And the fact that even today, that sort of idea of warfare is changing as we speak on the battlefields in Ukraine with drones, because that brings in a whole other dimension that's not really in this film, because back in Iraq, the impact of drones was pretty minimal. Now things have changed even more. So I expect at some point somebody's going to do something that sort of recognizes what's going on the battlefield today. It's the kind of film that if you liked 1917, I think you'd appreciate that, because that's another film that kind of sticks with more of the reality of what happens in warfare, although this movie doesn't bother trying to stay within one continuous shot. It's, the director's not interested in doing that. He's really more interested in showing you what these men go through on a typical day and how it affects them. And it's just very, very well presented, in my opinion. And the production levels, considering that this is a low budget film, pretty much, compared to, say, a typical Hollywood film, was really, really well done. The sets are amazing. Apparently they did film this in Iraq, so there's been some money spent there. They said something about the budget was estimated around 80 million. And so far it's grossed worldwide, I'm sorry, 20 million. And it's grossed worldwide 25 million. So it's already made its money back, which is good, but it's still out there going. So yeah, this is a really, really good film. It doesn't really have a standard plot like you would see in a normal film, but that's kind of the point, is that, it's kind of showing you a plotless point of a bunch of people's existence in the world under warfare. And so they brought in a lot of stuff that I thought was cool, like those Bradley fighting vehicles. I don't believe those are the exact ones. I think that those are specialized ones, which is pretty interesting, because I presume you can't really get onto the real ones. But I thought those were really cool, and the decision that the one guy makes to utilize them was really interesting, because they produce an amazing impact on the battlefield. So that was kind of cool. But of course, they're not flawless. Nothing is, and so they also suffer what happens to IUD when that explodes right next to one. Seeing the people wounded is another thing. What was the one? I think there was an HBO show called Generation. I think it was a Generation X or Generation something, but that was the first war in Iraq, and that was very very realistic as well. This is along that same lines, except there's a little bit more graphic depiction of what happens when you get wounded by an IUD, and it is not pleasant. And unlike a lot of other films where men are just kind of like gritting and bearing, oh no, these guys are freaking screaming because the pain involved with getting parts of your legs blown off is pretty damn intense. And the sort of chaos that happens when you're trying to fix these folks, or at least try to make them so that they don't bleed out, is just hair raising. They're giving these guys morphine, and then the morphine has very little effect, but you can't give them more because you have a chance of overdosing them. So you do the best they can, but trust me, you don't want to get wounded like that on the battlefield. That just looks horrible. And then the fact that they have to move them every time they move them, these guys are screaming in agony. It's really bad. So yeah, trust me, if you're gonna be a casualty in the field, I think you just kind of want to go out with a bullet in the head that you don't even notice. I would think. But all of that kind of detail is in this film, and if you're interested in that, if you sort of want to experience what it might be like to be in a real battle without actually being in a real battle, which makes a lot more sense, I think this is a film for you. And I think it's also a film for anybody who is interested in the more realistic presentation of warfare versus the sort of glitzy, glamorized Hollywood version with all kinds of stunt doubles and CGI and all kinds of extra stuff. There's really none of that going on. And yeah, it's really, really well done. So yeah, I mean, if I were to rate this film in our stinkometer, I would probably give this probably a 1. I don't really see any problems with this film at all. I had a really good time seeing it, even though I was pretty much on the edge of my seat. Really well done. Highly recommended. It may not be for everybody out there, but I think if you're willing to give this film a chance, I don't know, maybe you might understand what it's like for these poor suckers who go out there and have to fight for our country, or because of somebody's ordered them to do it. I think maybe if more politicians watch a film like this, they might think twice about expending American lives at the flick of a wrist, hopefully, you would think. But so I guess that's it. So thank you for joining us here at Quick Review Thursday for Indie Film Cafe. I hope at some point you get a chance to check this out. It's probably going to come out in DVD and 4K and Blu-ray and all that. It's just, trust me, this is another one of those films that's the impact of seeing it on the big screen is much better. So I recommend you go and check it out that way. But anyway, thanks for coming along, guys. And I guess we will see you on the flip side. Bye.